Hi, I'm Congressman Steve King. On July 11th and 12th, we debated my amendment number 45 before the House Ag Committee. My amendment that we call the PICA bill, the Protect Interstate Commerce Act. What it does is it prohibits the states from regulating the means of production of agricultural products. And that means that California, that has passed a referendum to regulate cage size for layers, Ohio, that's also got that kind of an initiative, the ban on gestation crates, all of those things would be outlawed by my legislation, and prohibiting the states from regulating the means of production is consistent with the Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution. It was an intense debate on the Ag Committee. It lasted over a span of time, but you're about to see the debate of the markup in the Ag Committee, and it's important that you listen to the words of everyone who engaged in this debate. And it's important that we go forward and defend this legislation as is now part of the Farm Bill. I want it to become permanent law. Watch. Thank you.
The clerk will distribute amendment number 45. The gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment is, we call it the Protect Interstate Commerce Amendment. It's legislation that I've worked on for perhaps over a year. What it does is recognize that we have states that are crossing the line on the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. Our founding fathers, in their wisdom, understood that we couldn't have states that were regulating products that were transferred and transported in interstate commerce, but yet we have states that are doing that today by regulating the means of production. So what this amendment does is it prohibits the states from regulating the means of production of a commonly traded or a traded ag product. And it does address a number of commodities that we'll be familiar with here in this committee. My attention was brought to it when we had the California carb issue. In full disclosure, gentlemen from California, when it endeavored to regulate the means of production of ethanol that would come into California. Then we saw in California and in Ohio regulation on the means of production of eggs from layer hens. Then we see an effort to regulate pork and prohibit gestation crates in the states. This scrambles and creates a patchwork quilt of state regulations that are designed to control interstate commerce when it's a violation of the Commerce Clause of the Constitution that has been litigated successfully in favor of the Constitution with regard to the California carb and ethanol, not so far with eggs, with pork production. And what's next, it will be, I think, the balance of the poultry, turkeys. I think it'll also go on to be beef. Pork is already affected by this. And if we wait for, say, 5 years to mark up another farm bill, it's going to be too late. We will have seen the means of production regulated by individual states, causing other states to have to comply. I happen to represent the #1 egg producing state, and I'd like to see them be able to produce those eggs in an effective and efficient way while they are humanely managing their animals. They do that. They have the best interest involved, and our producers do. They know what's best for their livestock. And the states don't. Often it's an agenda, a referendum that comes from the states, and it becomes a political initiative within the states. People go to the polls. They don't understand the broader issues any more than maybe the Senate will when this gets over to that side. And so, you know, I suggest that we put this marker down here in this committee. We do know about these ag issues, and the competition between the states can be a fair and open competition, but we cannot. This will be litigated commodity by commodity, product by product, through the court system, always reverting back to the Commerce Clause of the Constitution. And I think always through the court system there will be success, but there's no reason to pay out the trial lawyers to resolve this issue. We have a Constitution. We take an oath to it. So what this does is it clarifies and establishes the Commerce Clause of the Constitution by prohibiting the means of production. So I would say this, that if California wants to regulate the eggs that come into the state, fine. You can specify that they be egg-shaped, that they have a yolk, that they have an albumin. If you want to specify that pork is pork, beef is beef, turkey is turkey, go ahead and do that. But don't be telling the states that are producing a product that's already approved by the USDA or the FDA how to produce that product. And so that's what this amendment is. It is far-reaching, it's broad, but it's distinctly constitutional. And what it does is it defines the Commerce Clause in statute and makes it clear to the states so that each of the states can produce a product. We have it federally approved anyway, And I found no opposition among our ag producers in any way. And I think it's something that this committee should adopt, and I'd urge its adoption, and I would yield back the balance of my time.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Would the gentleman state his point of order, please?
Yes, would reserve a point of order here. This would seem to have a jurisdictional issue like several of our other bills. Obviously, as the good representative from Iowa indicated, is a far-reaching bill that covers the Judiciary Committee's jurisdiction and probably be inappropriate to take up at this time.
Gentleman would suspend for.
Mr. Chairman.
Verifying with counsel with what I believe to be the situation that is under the rules that we operate under, you have to announce your notice your point of order at the moment that the amendment is introduced, and that moment was missed.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, if I may just yield for a second, sir.
Absolutely.
I mean, we had that same discussion just a moment ago on a bill that I accepted yours and the ranking member's thoughtful counsel that the jurisdiction might have been exceeded, and would hope you'd extend that same courtesy at this juncture. Would only seem fair and appropriate in the spirit of bipartisanship that this committee.
The gentleman has a valid point. The gentleman has a valid point, but under the rules, not by intention or design, but we are where we are.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman's concluded his explanation. The gentleman strikes the last word. Recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I have to tell you I'm conflicted on this, because in spirit I agree with Mr. King. We have a terrible situation created by the voters of California with the egg situation there. Now that I'm a retiring member, I can say that I don't always agree with what the voters do. And they, in California, made an awful mistake with regard to the poultry situation, the egg situation in California. From that, you're correct. But the reality is that we have a terrible situation that your amendment, while well-intended, will cause tremendous problems for this bill. And I think what the chairman ought to do here, and I'm concerned about giving the chairman advice in public, but I think we ought to withdraw this amendment and figure out how to work with it, because I truly believe that you have some good points here, but this has got to be a no for us in California. We're trying to survive with industries that have been devastated by ill-thought-out public policy in the state. And I'd ask for you all to understand that we're trying to cope with a very bad situation. Farmers and ranchers, hog farmers, beef farmers, poultry producers, we have to figure out how to deal with this issue collectively and thoughtfully, because people don't grow up on farms anymore. Less than I think it's 1.5% of Americans have any connection directly to agriculture. This committee is much more educated about what actually happens on a farm than the average American these days. It didn't used to be the case, but it is today. And it is a real problem about how we're going to proceed on these issues. And so I would ask that we not move forward on this, because we have a severe problem in California, but it's going to be a problem in a number of other states. And I'd ask for your understanding on this.
The gentleman yield. Then I seek recognition.
Gentleman moves to strike. The last word is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not retiring, but I don't mind telling the voters of California what I think of their laws. I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment. It may need some fine-tuning moving forward, but I think it would be a very strong message coming out of the House Agriculture Committee to make it very clear that we do not believe in balkanization of commerce in this country, and that some of the laws that are being passed that are clearly targeting agricultural production in other states are very, very problematic, and we should send a strong message that we don't think that is where these decisions should be made. They should be made here in the United States Congress. We have clear authority under the Constitution, under the Commerce Clause, to regulate interstate commerce, and I think the gentleman's amendment is clearly directed to that point, and I support it.
Would the gentleman yield for question?
I certainly would.
The gentleman's a member of the Judiciary Committee. Would this not, in fact, do what Mr. Schrader said and create a jurisdictional problem for this bill as it moves forward?
I don't know whether it would or not, but I would say that the chairman and the ranking member and others are perfectly capable of limiting the scope of the amendment to covering agricultural products. I think that's the intent of the amendment as it's drafted, but if there are some defects there, I would hope that we would repair them rather than back away from what I think is a very important issue.
Would the gentleman?
I also would very much support it in the Judiciary Committee if it shows up over there.
Would the gentleman yield? Would the gentleman yield to me?
I'd be happy to yield.
I thank the gentleman from Virginia. I am actually very sympathetic to Mr. Schrader's point. I think that in the effort of moving in an aggressive way this evening, that perhaps unintentionally things were handled differently on the two amendments, and that's unfortunate. Under the rules, I'm not capable of backing up and changing that. I would hope Mr. King thinks very carefully about the jurisdictional issues. I would hate for us to become ensnared in some other committee's jurisdiction, but ultimately I can't tell Mr. King what to do. I'm not even sure his mother used to tell him what to do. But I do appreciate where the gentleman's coming from, and he makes a very valid point. And with that, I yield back.
I yield back.
With that, does anyone else seek recognition on the actual amendment? Seeing no additional...
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word.
Gentleman moves to strike the last word and is recognized 2 minutes.
I can see where this is going, but I would like to point out, again, in the spirit of comedy, that many of us in the western states face a different dynamic than many of y'all do out east here. We have what they call an initiative and referendum process. And as alluded to, it's not always the wisest process, but it is a very democratic process. For those of you that are interested in real democracy and getting people to rise up against agencies and politicians and all the goofy things that our government or we do here, it's not altogether bad. But it is a problem in some cases. This is one of the cases where it's a problem. Perhaps a problem in my state, problem in California, problem in Colorado, problem in a lot of other places. So I would ask that this amendment go down to defeat. It's not necessary. It doesn't help the spirit of this particular farm bill in any big way or form. And again, just in the hopes that there be some respect and understanding about the problems we out west face, like we trying to understand your crop insurance thing, the shallow loss deal. Some of us were prepared to try and help you all out here, but we'd like to see a little quid pro quo. So we're just asking for a fair shake, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Does the ranking member wish to be recognized?
I'd like to strike the last.
The gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I'm not sure I totally understand what this does, but I think in terms of the jurisdiction issue, we do something similar regarding milk marketing orders. So if this is limited to agriculture, I'm not sure we're going to have a jurisdiction issue. So I think that's a different situation. And I am very concerned about, I know you got problems in California and some of these other states. It is driving us crazy because these things come to our states, and then they're trying to pass them, in our states. And we don't want them. When we were at the having hearings in Stockton, you remember, your people came into the hearing and were complaining about all the regulations that were put on them, and they wanted the federal government to pay for it because they were being put upon by their own government. Well, I told them, I said, well, those people in Los Angeles and San Francisco want that, they can pay for it. The rest of us shouldn't pay for it, so I am sympathetic if we can somehow, I don't know if this works or not, but if we can somehow or another stop that. You got your problems in California. I don't know if this is going to make it any worse, but maybe it can protect us from getting screwed up from what you guys are doing. Anyway, I yield to the...
Well,
I'm trying to be sympathetic to the colleagues from the West Coast, but if one wouldn't mind explaining to me how doing this to protect the rest of the United States jams them up in some meaningful way, so that I can help me understand it, because it looks to me like this helps protect the rest of the country from that. I don't know how this negatively impacts California, so I'd be happy to yield or ask for my own time if someone would help explain that to me.
Mr. Chairman, if I
respond to the question.
Your state isn't going to do anything that the state doesn't want to do. California can't make your state do something because an idea spreads, even if it's a bad idea. I'd suggest that there are a lot of bad ideas spreading in politics these days that I don't agree with, that didn't come from my state, but that's a whole different matter. The reality is that you all states can control your situation. My state will probably say that we're trying to figure out a solution. And as we do that, if we come up with a solution that has bigger cages, and you can put small cages in Nevada right across the border, and our state can't prohibit it, then that's a problem for us in trying to sort of deal with our issue. And that puts a lot of folks out of business and causes tremendous dislocation.
But if I could, though, just that's the heart of the problem, I mean, the heart of the issue. And so what I hear you asking is that we somehow protect California from itself, and to the detriment of the rest of us. And I'm trying to get there, but I just don't see the rationale. Now you're back, Mr. Chairman.
I believe time has expired, but I think the gentleman, Mr. Kissel, has asked for recognition. Would like to strike the last word.
Mr. Chairman, move to strike the last word.
Recognized for 2 minutes.
Yield my time to Mr. Schrader.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I guess if the jurisdictional issue doesn't hold sway here, here's my ultimate concern. I mean, you guys, Chairman and Ranking Member, we worked real hard on this bill. And I'm deathly afraid that at the end of the day, there are those in leadership, maybe on both sides of the aisle, that want to kill this. This particular amendment gives leadership a great avenue to come in here, pluck this thing out, and kill the Farm Bill at the end of the day. And I'd like to think that we're better than that. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nagelbauer, seeks recognition.
Seek to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
And I yield to my friend from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I would just say that this is not just a problem with initiative and referendum. It can also be used for protectionist purposes, and it's not a new problem that the government, the country has faced. I mean, there was what's the case, Gibbons versus Ogden or something, a case of New Jersey and New York. New York trying to restrict shipping goods across the Hudson River from New Jersey in the 1820s is a famous Supreme Court case with that regard. Made it clear that the federal government has the authority to regulate interstate commerce and to step in and prevent states from taking actions that are directed in that fashion. I think the Agriculture Committee very much has the opportunity, carefully limiting this to agricultural products, to be able to impose this recognition that the federal government has the authority here, and that agricultural products produced in another state that may not meet these particular standards can't be restricted from getting access to those states. And if we don't take a strong stand at some point, the gentleman is correct, the gentleman from California is correct, we will see it proliferate all across the country. But if we take a strong stand, then states are going to find out that it's to their economic disadvantage to do this, and all of the agricultural activity will flow to those states that don't have these excessive regulations, and therefore I think that will be a discouraging factor, not just in other states, but in California itself, to send a strong message that you can't regulate interstate commerce by passing rules like the one that was passed by initiative and referendum in California with regard to egg production. So I, again, would strongly support moving forward with this amendment, and urge my colleagues to vote for it.
Gentleman yield back his time. Gentleman yields back his time. I believe the gentleman from Kansas would like to strike the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to strike the last word. Yield my time
Recognized for 2 minutes.
to my colleague from Iowa.
I thank the gentleman from Kansas for yielding, and first I would point out that the amendment references 7 U.S.C. 1626, Section 207, which you'll all have memorized by heart. It's a list of all of the agricultural products. So it stays, I believe, specifically within the jurisdiction of this committee and was written to do so. I wrote an original bill that went beyond this to all the products that are traded so that you could address it with steel and other items, but brought it to specifically so that it would be in order in this committee. And so however much the gentleman from Oregon might lament missing that opportunity to raise a point of order, I don't believe it would have succeeded in the end. But I will say the gentleman from California made my point when he said we have to be able to figure out how to compete. That is what's going on. It's trade protection within some of the states so that there's a competitive or a comparative advantage for the producers within that state that ends up locking out products from other states or compelling the producers from those states to adapt to a means of production which is inefficient, and it meets the political ideology of California, for example, and Ohio being another state like that. Referendum and the very democratic process that the gentleman from Oregon mentioned, I don't think it's very democratic for to have a state like Oregon or a state like California or any other state dictate to the rest of the country how they produce their ag products. And as far as this jurisdiction is concerned, again, it's narrowed to the Ag Committee. I serve on the Judiciary Committee along with Mr. Goodlatte. I thank him for his input on this amendment, and I have no qualms about what kind of pushback we might get from the Judiciary Committee with regard to jurisdiction. So I'm very comfortable with what we've done. Some said we should provide a solution. I have worked on this a long time. I think this is the solution. I think it's actually the solution for California's troubles too. And just think, if it had been 5 years ago, if this had been enacted into law, we wouldn't be in this situation or having this conversation today. So I thank the gentleman from Kansas, and I would yield back to him.
The gentleman yields back. Seeing a request for recognition from the gentleman from Indiana.
Move to strike the.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I know it's late, but I think this is probably one of the most important amendments that we may consider this evening, because this has huge ramifications for trade amongst the states. Coming from Northeast Indiana, we have a large egg production, several large egg production plants in Northeast Indiana, and they're concerned, and this is going to affect every state around the country, because California is such a large consuming state, and this is going to start creating a backlog of egg producers. They're going to have eggs that they can't do anything with, because Iowa eggs go to California, Idaho eggs go to California, Indiana eggs feed the Chicago market, and it's going to create a wave across this country that just cannot be handled by our egg producers. And I think that this amendment that Mr. King has put together is the fix, because we have looked at several other ideas to try to meet the problem that we all face, because we count on California to be that consumer of the products that we raise throughout the rest of the country, and so I think that this is a great fix, not only for the rest of the country but also for California, where we as the Agricultural Committee can step in, and as we focus on agricultural issues, we can say this is important not only to commerce but also to agriculture around the country. And this is a win-win for both California and for the rest of the country, and I appreciate Mr. King's work on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Seeing any additional requests for recognition? Seeing none, we will now proceed to vote on amendment number 45. All those in favor of amendment number 45 will signify so by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed to amendment number 45 will respond by saying no. No. It appears that the ayes have it. It appears that the ayes have it. The ayes do indeed have it, and amendment number 45 is adopted.
Now you've seen what I've lived through with this, and I'm going to ask you to stick with us and defend this language in the Farm Bill. And remember that in Iowa especially, this affects us a lot. We're the #1 egg producing state, we're the #1 pork producing state, and those are the two commodities that are most affected by the states dividing and conquering and regulating our commodities by the means of production. We can put a stop to that if we hold this language together, and I ask you to join with me. I think it's an important piece of legislation, and I strongly support it, and I ask you to do the same.